Thank you, President Hartzell, President Estrada, and all of the Texas Exes. It's quite amazing to be here. And as the other recipients have mentioned, I mean, what an amazing, amazing group of people. We were kind of debating earlier, what's hardest, going first or going last? And I don't know, I think everyone just did an amazing, amazing job. I wanted to take a moment to thank the people who spoke on my behalf in the video. So if you put yourself back, this filming took place in October of 2020, so right in the midst of the COVID pandemic. And Dr. Krejcarek, Anne-Marie, is the head of a K-12 school. At the time, she was in the process of reopening our school, and yet still took the time to speak on my behalf, which I really appreciate. Tom Loeb is the founder of Mellon Capital and has been my mentor for so many years. And then, of course, my beautiful sister, Martha, who also spoke for me. So thank you, Martha. Yeah. Thanks, Martha. So after a year like 2020, it certainly makes me appreciate my family more than ever. So I'd like to start out by first thanking my mom and dad, who are both with us here today. Gracias, mami. Gracias, papi. Hola, bienvenidos. Estoy tan feliz que están aquí conmigo hoy noche y vamos a celebrar bastante. So as you heard a little bit from the video, my mom and dad moved to the United States in the 60s and wanted to create a life for themselves here. My sister and I were both born, and a couple of years later, my dad was drafted to serve in the Vietnam War. And at that time, my dad actually never faltered, never wavered, said immediately he was going to go and serve the United States, even though he was still a Mexican citizen at the time, and take his time as a soldier in the war so that we could come back and live in this country. So my mom packed up my sister and me, and we moved back to Mexico City and lived with my grandparents for a year while my dad fought in Vietnam. Thankfully, and happy Veterans Day, Dad. Thankfully, my dad made it home safely, and a couple of years later, my little brother Carlos was born. And both my brother Carlos and my sister Martha are also here today. So my strongest memory growing up was about my mom and dad saying how important education was for our family. So to start off with my mom grew up in Mexico City and was not given the opportunity to go to college. So she definitely was going to make sure that her daughters went to college and had that opportunity. My mom is the one that always drove me to excel. When I came home with a 98% or a 99% on my exam, my mom wanted to know what I could do to make that 100%. And we would sit and talk about that, and then we would talk about how I could do even better. And that was the case even when I was here in the accounting program. So always striving for 100%. I like that goal. And frankly, I would not have been able to receive this award without my mom, my beautiful mom, because she paid all of my Texas Ex dues while I was in law school. So I remember coming home and seeing a plaque saying I was a life member, and I thought, wow, how did that happen? And my mom said, don't worry, I paid all your dues. So that's a good strategy to keep sending the invoices home because the parents will pay them. And then I'd like to turn to my dad, who is also here, as I mentioned. So growing up, my dad was very clear, and he would always say, the three of you are going to the University of Texas. And there was just no choice. It was the best school, and it was absolutely where he wanted his children to be educated. And he got his wish, and the three of us all graduated from UT Austin. So thank you, Dad. So I'd like to now turn to my husband, Mark, who is sitting here. who's been my biggest supporter and also my career coach. And we all need a career coach, especially the women who are going into fields where there are not very many men. So I remember I was the chief operating officer at Mellon Capital in San Francisco, and I came home, and one day Mark said to me, "So Gabi, what are you going to say when they ask you to be the CEO?" And I said to Mark, "That is the craziest thing I've ever heard. No one's ever going to ask me that. I don't know what you're talking about." Our boys at the time were 4 and 6, and I could barely think about getting through the next day, and I did not have the space to think about a possible promotion. But sure enough, 6 months later, I'm sitting in my office, and the head of BNY Mellon Asset Management comes in, has a seat, and says to me, to my surprise, that my boss has decided to retire, and he wanted to know who should be the next CEO of Mellon Capital. To which I promptly said, I should be the next CEO of Mellon Capital, and articulated all of the reasons why. And I never would have said that if Mark had not put that bug in my ear that maybe someday this could be possible. So thank you, Mark. Now, as you guys can imagine, getting the job is really only the first step, because then you actually have to do the job. And for the next 7 years, it was definitely quite a job. I spent 7 years traveling nonstop, New York to San Francisco. We live in San Francisco, plus global travel to see all of our investors around the world. And during all of that time, Mark never once complained. In fact, quite the opposite. He would make it a point to take our sons out on various adventures around San Francisco, which often included having pancakes for dinner. That was okay. But he made sure that they were distracted and they were having fun and they wouldn't miss me too much. So I definitely want to thank my husband, Mark. I'd like to thank my 2 sons, Franco and Marco. Also, my siblings, Martha and Carlos, and their lovely spouses, Brent and Susie, that are here tonight. My nieces and nephews, Drew, Grant, Carlina, Ender, and Alyssa. I definitely would not be here without all of your love and support. So thank you very much. Muchas gracias.